We are on Lamed Dalet Amud Aleph 34a1. So last thing we learned, Rav Ashi made a statement about kernels of wheat that were boiled first and therefore became disgusting. Where was that? That was a quote. I mean, it wasn't. Rav Ashi didn't say in the context of our discussion. Where was it actually said? Rav Avin Rav Acham Rav Yitzchak Abishal Gabal Shal Beis Rabbi Haya. Abishal was the kneader of dough in the house of Rabbi. And he would heat water for. They would heat water for him with a fire fueled by wheat kernels of truma that were tamei. And he would use the water to knead dough that was to be kept in a state of tara. Amai, the Gemara says, why are we allowed to do this? We're concerned that a person is going to go ahead and use those kernels, they're tamei, and he's going to eat them, he's going to touch them, all that. No, we're talking about kernels that were first boiled, therefore made disgusting. Therefore, there's no concern that he's going to, by mistake, go ahead and consume them, and that is why it's allowed, and that was the original source of Rav Ashi. Okay, now the Gemara continues, a bit of a long discussion, and ultimately it's going to come back to an earlier statement we made by Rav Yochanan yesterday. Amaya bar Avin, Rav Chanani bar Avin, Tani Trumas be Rabba. Abaya bar Avin and Rav Chanani bar Avin, two brothers, were studying Trumos, Maseches Trumos, in the Academy of Rabba. Pagbahu Rabba bar Masna. Rabba bar Masna bumped into them. Amrlahu, he said to them, Amrisu bis Trumos to be bar. What was said about Trumos in the Academy of the master? Amrulay. So, what were you guys learning? He said, so they basically said back to him, my kashlach, do you have any issues with Masech Truma? Do you have any concerns, questions, or whatever? Amrullah, he said, yeah, I have a question. It's not. It was taught in Mishnah. Shesile Truma shnitmu shsalam. Let's say a person has Truma plants that became Tameh, and then a person replanted them. Okay, so you have Truma that's Tameh, and so what do? You actually plant it again. What happens? Tahorim l'tameh, they are tahar regarding the Tuma. Vasur melechal, but you can't eat them. Ask the Gemara. Asks who was it? Rava Bar Masna asked them. Here's the question he had. Once you want to tell me that by replanting them they actually become tahar, why are they prohibited for Kohen to eat? In other words, if by planting them they become tahar, so why can't the Kohen eat it now? It should be completely fine for him to eat. Amrulay, Hachya Marabba. Rabba explained, Ma'asurim, what does it mean that it's Asar? Asurim Lizarim. It was prohibited for a non-Kohen, for Yisrael to eat. Okay, so basically it loses its Tumah status, but it still is Truma. Okay, so Ma'ika Mashalan, and what would be the novelty of this? Gedule Truma, that if a new growth of Truma, let's say you have onions that were Truma, you plant them and it grows back onions, so they still maintain their status of Truma. That's the Chiddush Tanina, we was already taught in the Mishnah, this halacha, Gedule Truma. The Mishnah says that the growth of Truma is Truma. Vechitim, Gedule Gedulan. And maybe you want to tell me that the Mishnah, that the novelty over here is that it's the growth of the growth. What we come and teach regarding something where the seed is not perished. Now, there's two types of plants. One is like an onion, where the bulb, you plant the onion, okay, the bulb remains and it just expands and it just increases the more onions. Or you have things like wheat, where the seed disintegrates and then something's new. So when the seed disintegrates, everyone's going to agree that it's something brand new and it does not maintain its original status. But you want to tell me that maybe the Bryce or maybe the Mishnah over here is coming to teach me that gedulin, that when it's something which is a growth of a growth, so it's, let's say you put onions into the ground and it regrows that same onion, but it also grows more. And maybe to teach me that in those cases that it's still going to be aser. That's what's coming to teach me. Hananim and Tanina, there's also on a Mishnah. Hatevel gidula mitaran, that when it comes to tevel is things, a produce which was not tithed at all. Lets you go ahead and you plant it again, its growth is permissible. But davar shezar kala, that's only when the seed perishes. Aval b'davar shezar kala, when the seed does not perish, like an onion where the bulb remains. Then even the growth of the growth is going to be prohibited in consumption. So we already know this. So ishtiku, so they were quiet. Okay, so Amrulay, so they said to Rabbi Masna, Midish Mialach, do you have any good answers to this question? Good question you're asking. Why would it be that that something which was Truma Tamea, you plant it, it becomes Tahar, but yet it can't be eaten. They try to answer and can't be eaten by Israel, but we already know that it can't be eaten by Israel. So what exactly is a novelty? What does it mean that it's prohibited to eat? Asur the Kohanim. A Kohen can eat it. While since it became invalid through inattention. Okay, through inattention, that because there's a halacha, you have to watch over Truma, and as soon as it becomes tummy, you stop paying attention to it, and therefore becomes invalid. So the Gemara now says, this only is true if the invalidation is something which is intrinsic. Intention is invalidation for the truma itself. Then shaper. This makes sense because basically once the Kohen wasn't paying attention to it, it becomes invalid, and therefore you grow it, you put it back in the ground. It's no longer tameh, but it's invalid because it's truma that a person was not paying attention to, and therefore it's invalid. If you want to tell me that intention is invalidation, because if I'm not paying attention, then maybe it's going to become tameh. Then what's going on over here? Because if that's the whole issue, then when I replant it and it becomes tahar, even if it was for sure tameh, it became tahar. So if the whole issue of I'm not paying attention to it is that it might become tameh, so I plant it over here and if it comes back out, it's tahar. It should be fine. It's mar. Okay, now we go into that whole discussion. Hesech hadas, when it comes to invalidation of inattention, Rabbi Yochanan says it is an invalidation caused by the possibility of tumah. Rabbi Shimon Lakish Amar Psul Gufavi, it is an intrinsic intrinsic invalidation. So what does it mean practically that it's a psul, that it's an invalidation because maybe came tabe? Practically, the difference is if Eliyahu would come and tell us that no, by the way, you think that maybe came into contact with tumah, it's not true. It's totally fine. I know Eliyahu was watching. Shomalo, we would listen to him and say it's fine to eat. It is a invalidation intrinsic. That if Eliyahu would come and say, oh, no one touched it, doesn't matter, because the point is that once there was an intention, it is intrinsically problematic. Now we're going to have some questions on Rav Lakish. There was a small cavity built in the altar, right? So you basically have the mizbeach. The mizbeach is like where they burn the animals, right? And you have a ramp. Okay. Now we normally think you go straight into the box, but it's not true. There's actually a little gap over there. The Maravish Kevish on the western side of the ramp. They would drop if there was an invalidated bird chatas. They would drop it there to uber turasan. They would wait for the appearance to be decomposed. They leave it overnight, it get decomposed, and then only after it gets decomposed, they would burn it. So now the Gemara is assuming the invalidation, and the Gemara is going to stick with this assumption. If it's an intrinsic invalid, there's different types of things which invalidate a bird. If it would be invalid because of some like intrinsic invalidation, you just burn it, because that's halacha. When something is no longer valid, you burn it. So we must be talking about an invalidation of inattention. And the Gemara is like this: if you want to say that the invalidation is because when I was not paying attention, that maybe became tameh mishum hachi by ibur tzura. That's why you have to wait. You have to wait till it's overnight, until the point that it loses its appearance, and therefore it's no longer kosher from this beach. Why? Why do you have to wait until then? Because in the interim, Eliyahu may come and say, by the way, that thing's tahar, okay? And therefore you can't just go ahead and burn it immediately, because there's still a possibility that it's okay. So therefore you have to wait until it's completely invalid by getting decomposed. If you want to tell me that once I don't have attention, then it becomes invalid, I would have to wait for a change in appearance. This is the rule, 34b1, I call shipsula begufa, anything which has an intrinsic invalidation, you start from yad, you get allowed to burn it once immediately. But if the invalidation is based on the blood or on the owner, then its appearance must first change based on the basis reifa. So again, if the invalidation is intrinsic, then you shouldn't have to wait until it gets the tzura, the form, gets ruined. So Amar Le, Rish Lakish answers, Hi Tana Tana debate Rabba Barvu da Amar. This Tana, Rav Yishmael son of Broka, who was the one who was the one who taught this last Mishnah, he goes like the opinion of Rabba Baravua, who said Afilu Pigul, which is having the wrong thought, which is an intrinsic invalidation. Talon Ibur Tzura also needs a change in appearance before burning it. Therefore, over here, even if inattention is an intrinsic thing, you would still need to wait until the appearance changes, and therefore it's not a question on Rish Lakish. Have a great day.